Hey homies, how's it going? Hope you're having a good morning. I'm Rob, welcome back to High Altitude Homesteading. In this week's video, we're gonna do some planting, and what we're gonna be planting is grapes. So I never thought we would actually be able to grow grapes on the urban homestead here in Colorado Springs because of our climate here. But after going to our local nursery, and they actually had some grapes for sale, and talking to the guys there, I learned a couple different things about different species of grapes and stuff like that. So when you're going to buy grapes, there's basically 3 different species that you can usually buy at a nursery or online. And that's North American, European, and Muscadin. So the differences between 3, you're going to want to understand those based on what climate you live in. What I think most people think of grapes whenever they see grapes or whatever is the winemaking grapes that come from Europe. So those are the European species, and those thrive in more Mediterranean climates, so usually growing zones 7 through 10, drier climates, Mediterranean type climates. Those are your European species. The other 2, the North American, the Muscadin. So Muscadin's a very specialized species of grapes. They actually only grow in humid south conditions, and so they would be like growing zones 8 through 10, and that would only be if you lived in the very deep south. So if you live in the south, you want to go with Muscadin species of grapes. Now if you live up farther north like me, we are growing zone 5, hardiness zone 5. So I never thought we'd be able to have grapes, but I learned about the North American species of grapes that actually do better in colder climates and shorter growing seasons. So they can grow in hardiness zones anywhere from 4 to 10. So if you are in a colder climate, higher latitude, higher altitude, something like that, shorter growing season, and you don't think you can have grapes on your homestead, try researching North American species grapes, because that's what we picked up here, that's what we're going to plant, and it seems like they thrive actually in colder and shorter growing seasons. Alright, so as you can see, these are both potted grapes. They're already rooted and everything like that. So sometimes when you go to the nursery, you'll find potted grapes like these, or even if you're buying them online, you'll get potted grapes, or they'll send what's called bare vines. So bare vines is just when it's not rooted already, they just send you the vine of the grape. And so everything that we do in this video will be similar, from planting techniques to soil composition to your hole depth. Everything like that's going to be the same with bare vines as it is with potted plants or rooted plants. The only difference is with bare vines, you want to soak the vines for 3 to 4 hours before planting them. The rooted plants you don't have to do that with, they're already rooted, but with bare vines, just remember to soak the vines about 3 to 4 hours in some water before planting them. So your real challenge with grapes generally is going to be location. So grapes require really deep hole, really wide hole. They like to spread their roots. So I've read a couple different things online, but pretty much I've read anywhere from digging a 12 by 12 hole to basically a 2 foot wide by 30 inch deep hole. I think I'm going to shoot for a middle ground. I'm going to try to go for 2 by 2 if I can get that. In our yard here, it's not that deep of soil, so you hit bedrock pretty quickly. Like when I planted these trees, I had some trouble just getting the hole deep enough. So we'll see when we get digging how deep we can dig here and what we can do. But that's going to be the biggest problem for us here, and I think most people with grapes, is finding a place that you can dig a hole that big and that deep, and finding enough space for grapes in general. Grapes, they get really big, and pruning is one of the most important things to maintaining a productive grapevine. You want to plant it somewhere where it's not, or where it's easy to get to prune it, where you're going to have be able to work on it easily and stuff like that. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when planting grapes is, if you can, it's best to plant grapes in what they call a heat pocket. So grapes, they really like heat, they like sun. And if you can find a heat pocket on your homestead or in your garden to plant your grapes, they will thrive there. So essentially what a heat pocket is it's a space in your yard that gets sun all day or gets the most sun. So if you have corner of your fence that, you know, would get the most sun all day, southeastern facing. But if it faces that way, then it would get the most sun and the most intense sun all day, and it would be, you know, a good bit hotter there than it would be in the rest of your yard. We don't have a heat pocket here that we are able to plant the grapes in, but that's just another thing to try to keep in mind when you're planting your grapes, is if you can plant them in a place that's considered a heat pocket, or at least that gets full sun all day. You want to make sure it gets full sun for most of the day, if not all of the day. Just keep that in mind when planting grapes also. So the last thing with spacing in grapevines is, if you are going to plant multiple vines, and if you're going to plant them in rows, then you want to make sure your rows are at least 8 feet apart. And that just gives enough space for the grapevine to properly spread, and for you to have enough room to get in there and prune. This also allows for air circulation around the whole grapevine, which is very important with grapes to help prevent disease. So grapes do not like to be bunched up or anything like that. So you want to make sure they have good air circulation around the vines to help prevent disease. So grapes thrive in well-drained, sandy loam soil, almost like any other plant. They like soil that's going to drain quickly. They don't like to have what's called wet feet, which is have their roots stay wet for a long time. So you want to make sure, if you have soil that's high in clay content or is not the right composition, that you amend the soil properly before planting your vines. And I'm going to show you guys what we're putting in, because here in our homestead, our soil is very high in clay content, so we have to amend it whenever we plant something. So I'll show you what we usually put in our soil to help with draining it better. Alright guys, so here is what we're going to amend our soil with. So what I have here is, this is a homemade potting soil mix that I make when we plant anything really in our yard, and it's basically just a mix of peat moss, vermiculite, perlite. It has a little bit of nutrients in it, but not much. It's basically just an amendment to help the soil drain a little bit better. That's what the perlite and the vermiculite is for. So that's the first thing that we're going to amend the soil with. That's just to help it drain better, so we make sure the grapevines don't get wet feet. And then the other thing that we're going to throw in, this is just well composted cow manure. So that's what grapevines really dig, is the composted cow manure. So those are two things that we're gonna amend the soil with, and let's get to digging the hole. So location, like I was saying before, is a little bit difficult for us, but where we're gonna put, so we have 2 grapevines, and where we're gonna put the first one is, we're gonna go back here, and we're gonna put it basically right here, next to these potatoes, and next to the wildflower space. So I'm going to put it right here, and then hopefully the vines, I'm going to put a trellis on the fence, and they'll grow to the right, you know, and to the left. And I already have irrigation right here. So that's where we're going to dig our first hole. Alright, so here's the progress so far after hoeing it up. I don't think we'll be 2 feet wide, but that's okay. Probably about 1.5 feet wide here. And now we're going to try to dig as deep as we can. So that's as deep as I think we're gonna get it here. It's about a foot, maybe a foot and a half if we're lucky. But that's what we'll go with because it's getting really hard. Had to break out the pickaxe. And yeah, so we'll throw our amendments in and get at it. Okay, because our grape plant is a lot bigger than our hole, what we're gonna do is we're gonna lay some of our amendment down first. And you always wanna mix some amendment with some original soil. That way, it's not shocking the plant too bad. And when the roots extend past your amended soil, it's not gonna be as big of a shock to your plant either. Because if it just goes from super rich soil to straight clay and its roots need to go down farther, you know, that can shock the plant and kill it eventually. What we're also going to do is kind of, because I didn't get deep enough, we're going to kind of build kind of a makeshift raised bed for this thing. Alright, so when I plant, I kind of like to layer stuff. So especially with these grapes, because they don't like wet feet, put your soil that you amended with the perlite and the vermiculite more on the bottom here. And then we're going to take our compost we're basically going to put that almost where we're going to plant the plant. Perfect. I'm going to plant the grape back here because I want it to grow on the fence. And unfortunately, I have an irrigation line right here, so I couldn't go right up against the fence like I wanted to. So I'm putting it kind of right here. So we'll see if it works. All right, so here's our hole filled mostly back in. So again, just dug it out, added the amendment, layered it, backfilled it with the same dirt, you know, mixed the amendment in with the dirt. So that's all we got here. All right, so mostly any transplant, it's gonna be the same type of technique. You're gonna wanna squeeze the sides of the pot. This one just comes out real easy. Kind of break up the roots a little bit on the bottom because it's been in the pot so long, but now my yard's on a slope down, so I like to kind of even it out. I also like to trench the sides with the hoe. That just allows for when the water, you know, is running down, it can run all into here, so you can kind of conserve the most water that you can. We'll mulch this eventually. First I'm going to get a good watering on it. Alright, so you want to give this a good watering. Alright, so give your transplant a good watering, and then the last thing you're going to want to do is, if your grapevine looks like mine, which is, it's kind of out of control, the nursery, you know, got it from the nursery, they just usually let them grow, so, which is fine, but how you want to prune a grapevine initially is, essentially you want two vines in its first year coming out to either side. So this grapevine probably has, I don't know, 6 or 7 vines at this point. I'm going to pick the one that I think is the healthiest, and I'm going to try to trim away all the other ones. So, I don't know, what looks the best to me? This one. So I think I'm going to keep this one right here. I'm not going to trim all these at once, because you're going to shock the plant. You know, you're transplanting it to a new place. It's coming out of its pot. So I'm not going to cut all these, but yeah, so I'm going to take that one off, and I'm going to take this little one off over here. So you can see there's still probably 4 or 5 vines on here. I'm going to let it recover a little bit and just trim it throughout the first year here. The other thing you want to be aware of is if you get a grapevine from the nursery that's potted, or even a bare vine and it already has grapes growing on it, you're going to want to cut those off. So like this vine had probably like 3 or 4 bunches of grapes on it. But you're going to want to cut them off because, again, that's just stressing the plant too much in its first year. Yeah, so I'm going to leave this here for now. Alright guys, there's the finished product. Doesn't look like much right now, but hopefully it'll grow and we'll have grapes running along all along this fence. So in the process of trying to find another place for these grapes, for the other grapes, I kind of realized we don't have much space out here in our front yard. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to put the second vine that we bought in this square over here, and we're going to have to build a trellis for it and everything like that. So that's going to be another video. I'll show you guys how to build a trellis for a grapevine, and we'll plant the other grapes. I just don't have the materials to do it today, so I can't do it on this video. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you found it helpful with the information about the different species of grapes and you know, soil composition and how to plant them and everything like that. We will of course keep you guys updated on how the grapes go. We'll of course do that other video on how to build a trellis for grapes if you don't have a fence to plant them next to. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you haven't, please subscribe below, and if you guys have any questions or comments, please also leave those below. And that's it for today. I'm Rob. This is High Altitude Homesteading. Hope you all have a good weekend.